Hello, my name is John Hewitt and I'm going to give you a little session on how you can edit work entry button scripts. So the work entry scripts are those that are used within the clinical record where you add work to a patient card. They are highly customizable and really you can have pretty much what you like in there. So in terms of layout, if you literally designed on a sheet of paper the layout you want, the order in which you want to put your work in, the questions you want asking, the things you want to price, we can create that for you on screen. So it's worth spending a little bit of time just having an appreciation of actually what you can do with the system. So within the Teleos program, in the clinical record, there is a series of buttons down the right-hand side of your screen. Historically, these were, on previous versions of programs, yellow, but yellow really didn't work as a color on here, so we've left them as green. And each of these buttons on here can be customized to suit the needs of your practice. So when we set you up with the system, we typically give you a template set of buttons, and then the trainer going through the system with you will edit them according to how you run as a practice. So within each button, we can tell it things like what the dispense fees are, what the injection fees are, and we can physically lay out the design to suit each practice and how you want your work entry to go in. So yours may not look exactly the same as this, but if I go through the buttons that I've got on here, if there's any things you see as you go through that you'd like in your buttons that you're missing, by all means contact the support team and they can put them in for you. So within the program, we've written another program, if you like, that allows us to configure these scripts to suit pretty much anything you want to do with them. And we've got some weird and wonderful things that they can do. There is documentation on it if you want to get into it in that level. But the idea is I'll give you a run through, give you some ideas, and I'll show you how you can edit the buttons. So each of the buttons is set up for each individual workstation. So if you've got a big practice and you've got different areas of the practice, like you've got a big lab area or something, you may well have different buttons on the right-hand side. So any edits that I'm doing now are just on my own workstation. They're not going to go across anywhere else, which is actually really handy because what we can do is we can fiddle around on here, get it to how we want to run, get approval from our colleagues, and then we can put it around the rest of the network. Just a word of warning when you're copying files around a network, there is documentation in the new features guide, but there is a folder within Televet, as you may be aware, called Upgrade. Now, anything you put in there will be distributed around your whole network. So if you do have workstations that have different buttons, please don't put them in the upgrade folder, because what will happen is every time the workstations log in, they will look into that folder and they'll say, oh, I've got a new file, and they'll import it onto their own system. So what you're doing effectively is overwriting the buttons that you previously got in there. So just be a little bit careful with that. So as you can see, I've got a script here. So I've got a complaint summary option top left. That's just a freehand box. Okay, and what I can do in there is I can set up different colors. So I can actually type anything I like in there and have it whatever color I want to have. In there as well, you can use Venom codes, which is veterinary nomenclature that is developed by the Royal Veterinary College. And that's a way of trying to get you clinicians to use the same terminology throughout the program. That becomes very useful, obviously, when looking at research projects and things. So that is available, or you could have a simple drop-down list, and I'll show you how you do those in a minute. The next thing that I've got on my list is my access to all my pricing. So in here, I've got all the pricing associated with the small animal consultation. This might seem a little bit alien to you if you have come from other systems, because what you might have done is put your clinical notes in first and then done the billing at the end. Because Teleos doesn't record lock, what it means is that you can basically be, as a clinician in the consulting room, you can put the minimum amount of work in that you need to on the script. You can select the add button down the bottom, which will put that work on, and it will leave you the script up so you can be putting your notes in whilst reception are taking the payment and letting the client leave the practice. So you don't get any bottlenecks within the practice itself. So hence, that's why I've got the pricing on the left-hand side, which is what I'd encourage you to do. If you don't want it that way, you can, of course, have your clinical notes down this side, and I can put my pricing in the middle or at the end. It's entirely up to you where things are. So I've got a pricing there. I've got a freehand item down the bottom here, freehand items box. I've then got an area here for putting clinical notes in. Now, many of you will just have one box that says clinical notes, okay? But if you want to be a little bit more strict in terms of how your vets put work in, then we might want to have owner's appraisal, examination, diagnosis plan. And you can title these whatever you like. I've also got up here a client note box. So what that would be used for example, if I put a code in Dent 6, I've got that set up as an abbreviation system. So when I press the space bar, it says we'll advise a dental within 6 months. Okay, now the idea of that client note box is anything that you put in there goes onto the foot of the client's bill or receipt. So it's quite a useful reminder. So you've got a note of it in the record card itself, and also you've got some evidence there with the client that yes, we did discuss having a dental. You've also got in there a note to reception. So if I pulled this client out of a waiting room list and I want to see the client again, I could actually just put a little note in there just to say, I want to see the client again in 5 days. So you don't have to rely on the client to then convey that information back to reception. Okay, so when receptionist picks the client up to pay, it'll tell them that warning in there. I've also got here a space where I can put weight and temperatures in. Okay, and also I can run other things from here. So I can actually call up other buttons. So for example, if I wanted to remind myself to do something with this client, I can click on set John Hewitt to do, and what this will do is pop up a box, and I can go and put in there phone RE Scooby, and I can put a date when I want to do that on there. So if I want to do it in a few days' time, I'll say I'll do it on Monday. Okay, how that's worked is we've created a diary previously to set that up, and if you download a copy of the new features and things you might have missed document, there is a section there about how these are set up. But by all means, give the support guys a call or email training@teleosvet.co.uk and we'll get back to you and sort that out for you. So other things you can do as well, you can have other groups of people. You have a generic nurse callback if you like, so that allows you to put a task on for the nurses to do. You could also access different diaries within systems straight from here. So you can have ops diaries linked to it, for example. Other bits you've got at the top, you can access any library functions as well in the buttons, and that's on all of the buttons as they're automatically. So you can open a web browser, you can go into your business directory, you can look at some manuals and things. You also can go onto Visio Care if you're signed up to that. Do have a look online at that. It's quite a useful little clinical tool, which quite a few of our clients now use. But to get back to the button here, so that's what the button looks like. So we can close that off. And to edit those, as I said before, each of the buttons here is in the local Televet folder that your workstation talks to. And that is shown on the front screen where your location is, if you're in any doubt. Okay. The file itself, the first file at the top, these are all .ini files. So the first one is historically has just been called newcons.ini. The second one is oldcons.ini, and then you've got button 3.ini, button 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, it's just a historic way we've named them. But a very simple shortcut way of getting into them, if you put the pointer over it and you press the right mouse button, it says, would you like to edit newcons.ini? So if you just say yes to that, it will then bring the script up. So that script is what created the button. So to make things easier, what I'll do is I'll see if I can get both on screen at the same time. So if we reduce that over a little bit there, stick that there, and then we'll go and open the button up again. And we'll just bring that one back up again. So what I've now got, okay, so this script here is being created by the list of commands we've got on the left-hand side. So we do have a document with all the list of commands in. Please don't assume that the program can't do something, because over the years we've done some very weird and wonderful things, and we've added some new functions in there as we've gone as well. So if I go through what the commands are doing here, so the first line I've got there is a line called consultation. So if you notice as well, there's an ampersand before the N. So what that lets you do is on the actual button itself, you can underline a particular letter. So in this case, the N, because that's where I've put it beforehand. And what that means is you can hold the Alt key down on the keyboard and press the N, and it will activate the button. It's just the same as clicking on it with the mouse. Okay, and throughout the program, you'll notice sort of that you can have underscores as well, and that works all throughout the program. So the first thing we've got is consultation. Now, consultation is just a title, okay? And I've got the word small animal consultation. So that's giving me what is in the box at the top left-hand side. It's giving me the client name and it's giving me the animal name that it relates to. The first functions at the top are all related to how the button is going to actually behave. So what we do generally by convention is we put the conditions for the button in at the top. So for example, the first command is ID chip check. So what that does, it just tells the script, if I pick up an item that is in my accounts category for ID chips, it's to pop a box up to ask me the chip number. I can then put the chip number in and it will record it in the card for me. Very simple command, you should always have that in there. The next command I've got is one called BP check. Now BP check is associated with batch numbers. So throughout the system, you can record batch numbers for everything if you want to, or you can select certain groups of products within a button. So if I was doing a farm animal consultation, I'd want to record all of the batch numbers for everything. Most small animal practices just record vaccine details. So that BP check there also is related to this batch command I've got here. So we'll jump down to here. So I've got the word batch. So what I'm saying is, if you know how the accounts categories work in the system, accounts category 705 is a canine vaccine, 706 is a feline vaccine, 707 is other vaccines like for rabbits. So what I'm saying here is I want to record batch numbers, but I only want to record 705 to 707. Okay, so I'm not going to record all the batch numbers for every product I dispense through this button. The next command, which you always have in as well, is IP check. Okay, so what IP check does is when you select a stock item that requires a label, what happens is it'll pop the label details up so you can enter all the dosage details at that point. When we first wrote the program, it was done so that you collected all of your items you're going to dispense, and when you press add or add an exit, it would then fire up all the label information. Now, obviously, if you're dispensing a lot of products, that could be a little bit long-winded. So what we did, we give you the option of putting IP check in, and I think pretty much every practice uses that now. And certainly in your template buttons you've had set up, it will have IP check in there. The next command, terms to. Okay, now this is related to if the animal is on a pet health scheme. So down the left-hand side here, okay, if this button here is activated, so it's in colour, then the animal is in the scheme. Now, we tell the system this by when you sign someone up to a pet health plan, it uses a spare field called terms to, which is on the animal record card. So what it's doing is we're saying, look in the terms to box. If there is a Y in there, it means yes, they're on the scheme. Okay, so if they're on the scheme, I've then got all this group of accounts categories. And what you can see here is I've got 304, and I've got a semicolon, 404, semicolon, 525, etc. So all of the arguments in the scripts here are separated with commas. So the first part of the argument is that we've got a comma, then we're specifying the groups of accounts category codes that this is to apply to. So I've got all these things, and you separate things with semicolons, or you can put a hyphen in there. So all of this here, this second part here, is all part of the same command until we get to the comma, just at the end there. Okay, so we've got all these items, 304 all the way through to 714. Okay, I want to apply, and then it's got a 10 on the end. So I want to apply 10% discount to any of those items. So typically with a pet health plan scheme, you're probably going to offer things, extra incentives to the client, offer elective surgeries such as dentals and things. You might want to give a 10% discount. This just means if the animal is a member of this, then basically give them a 10% discount off of those groups of accounts category items. Now, I've also got a terms to command again. So what it's doing this time, exactly the same if the animal is a member of the scheme. In this case, 708 and 709, lifestyle foods and prescription foods, 708 and 709. I want to give a 5% discount off of those. So 10% is a bit generous, so I want to just give 5% off of foods. So you can apply these discounts to whatever products and services you want to apply them to as part of your own scheme. The next command I've got there is one called no label. So within each of the buttons, you can specify what groups of accounts category code you want to have labels pop up for. So I've got here no label. Now 701s are all of my over-the-counter sales items, pet shop items, that type of thing. So I'm never going to want labels for those in this button. I've also got 702s. Now 702s are injectables. So if I'm giving an injection, I'm giving the injection. I don't need to do a label for it. If I dispense the same product, so we're talking about insulin, in a dispense button, however, I would want a label created for that. So you can see how, dependent on which button you select, they can behave differently. I've also then got 705 to 707s, which are my vaccines, and 708 for probably miscellaneous items. So we've already discussed the batch command. I've then got a command called how much. Now you'll come across this occasionally, more commonly in a surgical button. So if you want to give some variation to the standard price, then you can use a how much command, okay? And what that will do is it'll pop up a box and ask a question of the user, okay, what do you want to charge for this? In this case, I've got how much 103 are my balances brought forward. So when we transfer practices onto Teleos from another system, it's quite common that you can't actually pick up a total figure because there's a calculated value within the old program. So what we sometimes have to do is print an age debt list off, and then we go into a client card and we select an item called balance brought forward, which happens to be in 103. It will then pop up a question of the operator saying, please confirm amount, and in brackets I've got including VAT. So that will allow you then to put a number in, and that will go in as a transaction line for that amount. The one at the end defines whether the amount we're asking the user to put in is inclusive or exclusive of VAT. So if it's inclusive, you put a 1 in there. If you want it exclusive, you press a 0. The next thing I've got is a command called other fee. Now this is very common. You should all have, you should all be making use of other fee. And what this is it's used for dispensing fees. So what I'm saying in this button is if I've got an item in 704, which are my tablets and things I count out, okay, I want to add, there's a comma there, I want to have £4 or €4 plus VAT to that amount. So for each item in 704 I select, it's going to add 4 units of currency. There's another command that is occasionally used, which is called two-tone. And what two-tone does is it allows you to charge a higher amount for a first item and then reduced amounts for subsequent items thereafter. So I could have two-tone, say 704 items, and then say £4, and then I could charge £2 for subsequent items as well if I want to. So that's in there if you want to use that. More commonly, we just use the 1 dispense fee because it's obviously then consistent across the board. Fee pop-up is another command that is used quite commonly, and we use that typically for injectables. So my injectables are in 702, and what that's doing is it's going to pop up a little box that says injection type, and then it's going to look in a file called inject.txt. Now this is another file that's in your local workstation, so it can vary between workstations across your network. But inject.txt is just a simple text file, and it'll say in there, it'll have the words typically saying subcutaneous, comma, 4, which is £4 or €4. It will then have intramuscular, £4, €4 again, and you'll probably have intravenous there at £10 or something. Okay, so that allows you to select from the box. So again, we're telling it within this button what the injection fees are. So whenever you see an apostrophe in computer language, it means that the processing can ignore that line. So it'll get down to those lines, see there's an apostrophe there, and it'll move on and just totally ignore that. So if you are playing around with a button, don't delete lines, just put an apostrophe in front of them, because then you can easily recover to get back to where you were. And what this line is doing here is multiple animals. There's a useful command called multiple. Okay, now I've not activated it here, but I have on the vaccination button. What it lets you do is when you're putting some work in, so say you're doing a vaccine and you're giving a full booster, the client's brought 3 dogs in, okay, I don't want to have to go in and out of each of those dogs' cards putting in the same information. So what I can do is I can tick the box that says multiple, put my vaccination in, and then it'll pop another box up that says which animals am I treating. So you simply go through, tick the boxes, it'll process those and it'll put information into each of the animals' records cards. It'll set the reminder for each, okay, and it'll bill it. But as I say, in here, I'm not using that command, and I'll cover it in the next button that we look at. So we put all the environment in terms of how our button is going to behave, in terms of extra charges and things. And now we're getting down to the actual cosmetics of the button itself. So I've got a complaint summary box here, and this is my line that's coming up here. So I've got complaint summary. I'm using a command called memo. Now, there are various types of memo command that you'll come across. This is the most common, memo, so it will just put wording into the clinical notes, nowhere else. So I'm just using a memo command there. separated with a comma, and then you see I've got another comma straight after it. So I've got nothing in between the commas. Now that is another part of the command, because what we can do in there, if you want to, we can put in the animal presented with any words that you want standardization, and it'll put those same words in should you want to. The next part of it, I've got here 135, 120, 70. So the 1 is telling me the size of the box. So I'm just having a 1 unit box. The next bit, the 35, 120, 70, is specifying the colors that I'm going to be using. So if you look at an RGB color chart, you can actually have any colors you like. So just go and pick a color, look at its properties, make a note of them, and then put the numbers in here. So it's RGB. The B there is telling me that I want that information in bold. So anything I type in there is going to be put in bold. And I can also specify the font size, okay? So I want a point size of 13 in there as well. So you can vary those. Now, just so that I've got, I can remember going forward, I've actually got a little note of that for myself in here. So I've commented out a line that says syntax of memo is as usual, then RGB in example, okay? Now, also in here, you remember I mentioned about having Venom codes. So Venom codes were developed by Dan O'Neill at the RVC. What he's done is come up with a whole list of veterinary nomenclature, so to try and get everybody to put work in the same fashion. So when we're doing research projects and things like this, we're comparing apples and apples, and we haven't got to do lots of other algorithms on trying to work out, does this really mean this clinical note or condition? So to activate the Venom code, you just simply put that line in basically to Venom code list and then end. So the apostrophe in front of it, again, is commented out, so I'm not using it. I also mentioned you can have just a simple drop-down list. So again, we've got a command in here called list, and I've got one here that says conditions.txt, okay? So again, it's a text file, and if you open up that text file, you'll find there's all the veterinary terminology that you guys tend to use. Again, commented out so it doesn't appear. So we've got our complaint summary box at the top. What I've then got is a line that says priced items, okay, comma, pgrid. So pgrid is the command. So pgrid creates this grid in here. And then within it, we've got control over what items actually appear. So I can choose to have proc, stock, or proc substock. So in a small animal consultation, you should always have proc substock. So if you remember how stock cards are made up, they're made up of an outer stock card, which is how you purchase the product in, and then the substock is how you sell that product on. So if I put, for example, in there proc stock, okay, so I am getting access to the outer card, I can guarantee you that one of your vets within the first 10 minutes will sell 10 boxes of 500 tablets because they'll inadvertently pick the wrong item off the price list. You never sell boxes of things through here, so we always use the substock items. Okay, so the command I'm going to use there, I've got pgrid, which creates the box. I've got proc and substock items, so I want to have procedures and stock in there in both at the same time. And then we specify what accounts categories of products we're going to use. So I'm putting in 101 to 799. Now, by convention, that will be all of your small animal fees and drugs. If I was doing a farm card, I could specify, typically farm procedures start with 800. So obviously I can have 800 items going on and ignore the small animals if I want to. So it's entirely up to you what goes in here. We do have a number of practices that are part of a group that actually have different price lists at each of their sites. So some are higher on fees, some are higher on drugs. And what we do there is we basically create 3 sets of pricing in the main database, but then with these buttons here, we control what set of pricing they actually see. So the pricing will be pertinent to that branch. Okay, so it's a very powerful little tool and you can use it in lots of ways. So we've got our proc substock there. The next thing we've got is a little command called gap2. So when you're designing these buttons, it works from top to bottom, okay? And you'll want to sort of cosmetically put in some spaces. So what it's doing is it put a couple of little spaces in before my next command. And my next command on there is a freehand item. So if you want this freehand items box, which just lets you put one-off things that aren't in your price list in there, you just use a command called itext. Now, if I didn't put the next command in, which is called column, What would happen is the next command would appear under this one and it'd go off the screen basically. So I wouldn't be able to access it. I wouldn't get to the add and exit buttons. So what we need to do is we need to tell it, okay, start a new column, which is just the word column. Now, what a lot of practices will do in this section is have just a single clinical notes box. So what can I have? I've apostrophed it out, as you can see. Of clinical notes, I'm using the standard memo command that we've seen before. I've got nothing between those comments again, but I can put standard wording in as well between those commas. And I've then got 10, which represents 10 lines of text in there. Okay, but I'm not using that one because what I've got here, I've got owners appraisal, examination, diagnosis, and plan. So again, I'm just using the memo command. I'm putting the title on, so you can call that whatever you like. Call up the memo command, and then I've got the size of the box at the end, so 4. Okay, so on owner's appraisal, I've just got a standard box at 4, and it's going to be black because I haven't specified it otherwise. The next command I've got down is, again, using a memo, but this time I'm using the RGB color scheme again. So again, the first comment there is the number 4 between the commas. I've then got 0170, which is going to give me my RGB, and again, I'm bolding it in that box. Okay. So again, look at an RGB color wheel, make a note of the colors you want to use, and it can make your notes look a lot easier going forward. I'm using diagnosis again, same size box, 4 units, and then I've got 40, 120, 1255 as my RGB. Again, I'm bolding that as well. Plan is just the same as well, different color again, and then I've got another column. So we've got to the bottom here. I'm now starting another column. Now I've got a different memo box here. So this time I'm using a thing called Memo 2. So what Memo 2 does, it puts a copy, anything I type in, it puts a copy into the clinical notes, but also it puts a copy of whatever's in there onto the client's bill or receipt. There are some other memo commands as well. There's one for farm practices to use, which basically will allow that text to go into the body of the invoice. So if you've made 20 trips to a farm during the course of the month, there's no point putting the notes on the bottom of the receipt as you would a small animal one. It goes in the body of the text. So you can chronologically see what visit and what drugs were used at each visit. So it's a Memo 2 box. Again, I've got nothing between the commas there, and I've got just the size of 2. So you can see it's just 2 units, half the size of these other ones. Now, just so that I make everybody totally aware that anything entered in here goes onto the client's bill or receipt, it's worth putting a little note in there. So notes entered above will appear on the client's bill or receipt. Because obviously we don't want to put something a little bit controversial in there that the client might get upset about. So that's purely just used for anything that we want the client to know about. So just to put that on, you can see I've just literally typed notes entered above will appear. I've separated it with a column, with a comma. It then says caption. So caption is a command that's putting it onto the box there. And then I've got a comma and I've got bold command again, and also a new one, C, which is center. So I'm going to bold it and center it within the column. Now it doesn't text doesn't wrap around, unfortunately. So what we have to tell it is there's another line in on the client's bill or receipt, again, caption BC. I've then got another little few spaces in there, so it's not all too closed up. So I'm using another gap command there, so gap 4 in this case. The next thing I've got another memo command. This one's called Memo Recep. So this is this box here. So anything I type in there is going to pop up at reception. So as you saw before, SI5 will put in there, see in 5 days. I've then got another gap. I've then got a wait command. So I'm using wait 0, should be between those 2 commas. That tells it to not record the current wait unless you put one in. So it's defaulting to 0, so it won't put 0 in as a recording. And you can specify the measurement you're going to put it in, which is obviously kilograms. Okay, so it's just wait 0K will give you that this wait box here. I've now got 2 temperature boxes. I've only enough called temp. Okay, and if you've got Fahrenheit and centigrade, then you can have both on there if you want to. Again, I've got a gap, and then I've got this bit here, print fee note. Okay, so this is print bill. Now the fee note command is called bill. Okay, and the 0 there tells me if the box is ticked or not. So you can see it isn't ticked, so that's the 0. And the 1 is saying, is it displayed on the script or not? Because we do have a few practices that want to automatically have a printed bill chucked out at reception when the vet has done their consultation, okay? In which case, I will put in 1 in there to say, yes, I want a bill, and 0, I don't want the option of not having a bill. So it's just automatically going to produce one. I don't need to see it on the script. I've then got some other buttons here. So I've got set nurse callback, canine ops diaries, etc. And these are additional commands here. So I've got a caption, first of all, which says set follow-up call. Okay, that's that line there. And then I've got, I've created some diaries in the system. So if I look in my local Televet folder, I've created one called nurse to-do list, okay? So it's just a generic list, and the one there indicates the number of days ahead I wanted to jump. So you can put it as 0 if you want today. If you want it automatically to be a day ahead, you put 1 in there, etc. Now what this is doing, we're using 2 commands here. We've got one called button, which creates the button, and then it's telling it an appoint. So looking for an appointment diary. Okay, nurse to-do list. Now there is extra documentation on this. Don't get too bogged down in it if you want to set these up. You might need a little help doing these. I'm using the same one there for a number of other appointment diaries. Okay, and then I've got one down the bottom here where I can create this cardiology examination. So if I want a separate access to a separate button that's going to do more things, a more specific type of consultation perhaps, then I just create another ini file, just the same way as all these other ones, but I've just called it cardarea.ini, and it will be in my local Televet folder. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how scripts are created, and changing the order of things in here will change on the script. So if I wanted to put my pricing grid here into the middle, I can just move that line and move it up. So if I wanted to look at my vaccination button, for example, again, just click on it here. And you remember I mentioned about the multiple animals tick box. So we can just tick that, and then I can put in a vaccination, and it'll ask me how many animals I've treated, which animals I'm actually treating with that. So again, I've got a pricing box here. Obviously, someone at some point has asked me, can I put a body condition score and have some detail about treatment for plaque and gums, etc. Now these can be drop-down lists or just freehand text. And I've also got here a series of tick boxes. Okay, so if I wanted to record a full health check automatically, I can pre-tick these boxes because we know that you won't give a vaccine unless you've done a health check. Okay, but it just tells the system, yes, we did it. And I have got a couple of practices out of trouble historically where a client has claimed that after something had happened to the animal, you didn't do a full health check. And we could just simply go into the database table and say, work was originally added this date, and yes, all these boxes were ticked. The fact they were done automatically is neither here nor there. The fact is that they were on the record, so the problem went away. So it might be worth you doing these. If you want your vets to actually tick them, then of course you can set them to be not ticked. And if you want to change the status of them, a very quick way is just pressing the space bar and then tabbing around. You can just use tabs that way. Other bits I've got on here, I've just got a little note for a clinical info box in case there's anything else I wanted to add. I've also got the ability of giving a vaccine discount. So I've got a 10% vaccine discount, 15% vaccine discount. Okay, and again, I can print a bill, and I can update animal's weight. The date box you wouldn't ordinarily have on a script, but that's useful if I wanted to backdate something or wanted to put something on that wasn't for now. Okay, so typically you'd use that for farm work entries, where you're typically booking the work a day or two after it might have been done. But you can have any function on any button basically. But the date here is a bit superfluous because we know the date and time automatically. So to access that button, again, put the pointer over it, press the right mouse button, and would you like to edit old cons.ini? So we say yes to that. So the top of the box is very similar. So pull out vaccination title again. We've got a no label command. We've got our ID chip check, BP check, IP check, just the same as before. We've got our batch number check. We've got our other fee. So it's adding £4 to dispenses that we might do through that button as well. I've got a fee pop up again, just the same for injections. And what I'm then doing, okay, because at the bottom, if you recall, I had this 10% vaccine discount and 15% vaccine discount. Associated with that, you need to tell the system what items are to be discounted and which are not. So I just want these vaccine discounts to apply just to vaccines. So what we do here is we use a command called nodisk. What nodisk does is we basically tell the system what items we do not want to discount. Okay, so it's a bit of reverse logic, but it's which ones we're not discounting. So these are again our accounts categories. So 101 to 305, 307, 405, 407, 505, etc. So what we're basically saying is 306 is going to be handled differently, as is 406, as is 506, and they happen to be dog, cat, and rabbit, etc. vaccines in that order. So we've applied that command at the top just because that's typically where we put all the instructions on how the button behaves. Then here we start to build the button itself. So again, the first thing I had at the top was a multiple animal tick box. Now, by default, it is ticked to 0, but you can, if you wanted it to always happen, you put a 1 there, not normal, but you might have instances, I guess. You've then got your P grid item, again using proc substock, so it's just the same as before. We create another column, and then I'm just using a text box for body condition, score, plaque, and gums. You can just create whatever you like in there, and it'll be stored as those titles with whatever text comes after them. Then we've got a caption in there. So we've got health check, and again, caption, bold, and center it. And then what we're doing is, this is a new function here. It's called an H check, a half button check, if you like. So it's creating a half-size button on those columns. We get 2 in a column, basically, 2 alongside each other. And I've pre-ticked them by just putting a 1 at the end there. As I said previously, if you want to make your vets enter them, then you put 0, and they'll need to then either click on them with the mouse or press the space bar as they tab through them. So the command there is just the same on all of those things. I've got a clinical info box just using memo again, just a small size 2. Again, I'm using the GAT command. And then I've got my vaccination discount boxes. So we put the title on there, 10% vaccine discount, which appears on the script. I'm then using a function called dcheck, okay, discount check. And then the argument there, 0, is whether the box is ticked or not, which it wasn't. 1 is whether it's displayed or not, which we do want it displayed. And then you can specify it to be stock procedures or both. Now, it doesn't actually matter because at the top we've already defined it via the accounts categories. So you might as well use the word both in there, okay? Comma, and then you put the percentage amount on the end that you want that box to apply if it's ticked. So the second one, 15% vaccine discount, just exactly the same, apart from I've got 15 at the end. Again, I've got my print build command, which you can have in there if you want to, and I've got a wait command, and the date box is just literally a box called date. Okay. On the farm side, there is a date to command, and what that does is it remembers the previous date. So if you're entering a load of work from a few days ago, okay, you haven't got to go in each time you go into a different client account and change the date each time, because what it will do is it will default to that date each time you go in and out of a record until you close the program or change it. Okay, so it's handy for having batch work. But for purposes of small animal, you just use date if you wanted to use it at all. So that's that button. The next series of buttons we've got, okay, is nurse consult surgery. So what we can do, you can have 8 buttons down here, and then within them you can, I think, lodge 20 different other buttons. So you can have 160 different types of work entry script if you ever wanted them. Obviously, you're not going to do that. But here what I've got is I'm grouping a whole load together. So if I've got some nurse consults, I'll put ones like a general nurse consult in one. We can have seniors clinics for dogs, cats. I've also put surgical work in there as well, okay? And we could have different types of script if we wanted to for different health plans. So if I right mouse click over that one, it says, do you want to edit button 3? So button 3 is the overall button. So I'll say OK to that. And what we've got here, we are using a new command here called menu. So what menu does is basically you call up the ini file. So this ini file is going to find in your local Televet folder. So nurseconsult.ini, comma, and then I'm giving it a description that goes on the button. It's a general nurse consultation. So I've then got the menu geriatric canine.ini. If I didn't want to use the word geriatric, I could just put senior canine consult in there, just change the description if I wanted to. So it's just literally using a menu command, and I think you can have 20 different buttons nesting down from this one. So it's very flexible how you do it. So other buttons, if I wanted to get my surgery button, for example, so click there, go over it, and right mouse click over the button. Okay, so it brings up the surgery I&I button. So this button here, very similar to the top, I'm using again a title, I'm using no label, I'm using ID chip check, BP check, IP check, batch numbers. Okay, I might have a how much command if you wanted to use that for some surgical items, or you wanted to have some flexibility on pricing. Up to you if you want to work like that. Other fee, again, here this is a bit different. I've got other fee applying to categories 703, 704, 713 and 714, and I'm only applying £1.46. So obviously this button's got left behind a wee bit, or I just wanted to act differently. The fee pop-up is just the same. Again, we're using that, and then I've got surgery performed as a text. I've got, I'm using a date on there, clinical info box, weight again, temperature. And what I'm doing in here as well is we can bring in some normal ranges. So I've got glucose normal ranges there. I can use L text, which is lab text. Okay, and we can set up whole buttons for you. So if your lab equipment you've got in-house is perhaps a bit dated and it doesn't talk directly to Teleos, then we can create profiles for each of your tests that you run on those. We can set normal ranges up for you. Then all you have to do is go in and put in the test results and mark it high or low as appropriate. So we've got print labels, print bill again. Also on this script, I've got a button where I can specify that the work I'm doing is for insurance work. So within the program, as you're probably aware, you can actually create separate insurance invoices, and on the financial tab, it will create an separate insurance tab. So if I was putting some work in surgery and I know it's to claim on insurance, then I can use a tick box here. Again, 0 will denote whether the box is ticked or not, which is 0 is not, and 1 is whether it's displayed or not. So the syntax is the same for all the functions. So again, I've got a pricing grid there. I've also got freehand items. I've also brought in another command here called user. Now what that does is it's a way of actually specifying, if the nurses are writing up your ops for you, you might want them just to have a little box which they can go down and they can identify which vet's actually done it. There is also another command we can set that will pop up each time you add work and just say, please confirm who's done the work. But that's another way you can do it in here, just in the script. So just to show you what that script looks like, okay, so I go onto there and I click on surgical work. Okay, there's my script. So I've got surgery performed there. I'm telling it the date. Okay, I've got my tick box for insurance. I've got access to my pricing there. And I'm also saying, okay, which vet has done the work. Okay, so you can do that. So what it'll do is it will record down the right-hand column here. It'll show the person that put the work on, their initials, and also the vet that did the work. So when you're looking at your vet reporting or looking back through clinical notes, you can easily see who's done what work. Okay, so that's a general idea of how the buttons work. And other things I've got on here, there's a lab recording. Again, that's a nested one with all sorts of different old IDEX machines in there, vet tests and things. We can set normal ranges. I've also got dispense, so we can have small animal, large animal, equine. Some of our clients have booked price versus invoice price for those, and we can vary the pricing accordingly. I've also got buttons for repeat prescriptions, which you'll all have already. You can have a staff work entry button, which tells it to, for example, take cost plus VAT on drugs, and then whatever discount you do on fees. We can also create estimates, and then you can turn the estimates into work, which you're probably aware. And then the farm ticket entry, very similar to small animal, but I have got a date box in here. As I say, it will be a date 2 box in this case, so it'll remember the date when we go visiting, going in between different, booking different work. I've also got here visit notes. So this box here will be for notes that you put on your system. You just want clinical notes. The invoice note, anything I type in there will go in the body of the invoice. So it'll be alongside what the visit was about and what the drugs were used and what the batch numbers of the drugs. It'll also then have a text there to say what it was for. So again, you can have whatever you like layout wise. So you can literally draw on a sheet of paper how you want to have a script for entering work, and it can pretty much almost certainly be produced in here. So I hope you found that useful. If you've got any queries, please do send an email to training@teleosvet.co.uk, and either myself or one of my colleagues will get back to you and we can talk specifically about how things would affect your system. Thanks for your attention. I hope you found it useful.